Hey everybody, it's Party Elite, and today I want to take a look at the brand new gameplay mode that Creative Assembly will be adding to Total War 3 Kingdoms, Dynasty Mode. A free addition to the game releasing alongside the upcoming 8 Princes DLC, Dynasty Mode lets you assemble a team of 3 major characters from this setting and attempt to hold against wave after wave of enemy forces in a handful of real-time battle maps. I'm going to start off with a bit of an introduction to the mode so we all can see and know how this works, but then I want to have a more in-depth conversation about what something like this is actually worth, if it's worth anything at all. Before we dive in, I'd of course like to thank Creative Assembly for giving me early access to the game mode. I'm always happy to try these things out, and definitely always happy to share my thoughts and concerns. Much like the Laboratory Mode for Warhammer 2, Dynasty Mode is a new experimental battle mode. Unlike what was done for Warhammer 2, however, Dynasty Mode is experimenting with a new gameplay system as well. Step 1 involves selecting 3 characters, ideally 3 characters who synergize. The characters are divided into elemental categories, and each has their own starting skills, some determined by their category, and then they've got their own skill trees that you'll try to advance through over the waves as well. You can choose from a few maps that have a radial layout, allowing the enemy waves to spawn all around you, and you can choose to up the unit size as well. That last bit is where the partnership with Intel kicks in, where some of the heavy-duty processors should help you crank things up to 600% unit sizes, which is what we're going to try doing today on an older i9 processor. So, as the gameplay takes over in the background, you'll see a couple of things. For one, the general selection and retinue layout has been changed for this mode. General abilities can be activated without having them selected, they're very easily accessed, and of course, there are no retinues. This is actually a completely different subgenre living within a strategy game. As generals ride around absolutely destroying enemy units, you'll see the scoring system involves not only the killing or routing of enemy waves, but also the rate at which it happens. There's a time bonus at the end of every wave, and it all adds up for you when you finish wave 30 or come to the end of your 60-minute attempt. Naturally, there are leaderboards that keep a track of high scores, and that, in my opinion, adds a reason to do this from a player's perspective. Bragging rights and all that. After every wave, you're able to either add a new skill to each of your heroes, heal them for the next wave, or save the skill points to accumulate them over waves and obtain higher level skills. This adds a very simple economy to the game mode as well, if you will. Do you spend the skill point now or save it for better upgrades? Do you need to heal your hero, or can they hold on for a few more waves, etc., etc.? Now, certain skills provide passive buffs to allies, some only apply buffs to oneself, and many skills are only active under certain circumstances, like hit point thresholds, or when engaged in melee, or when standing still. Now, if you enjoy the battle mode of Romance Mode, and you like pushing your heroes to the limit, I think this will be an enjoyable mode. In fact, in this mode, they crank up the hero characters quite a bit, they cause more damage, units are a lot weaker as well, so this is all about having some brutal, action-packed fun. Now, especially with the size turned up to 600%, if your computer can handle it, there are some pretty epic moments that can be created here. I think what's worth noting is that Dynasty Mode is an actual gameplay mode with an actual purpose, rule set, and victory conditions, so to speak. I'm a sucker for leaderboards. I don't want to know how much of my life has been spent playing Geometry Wars or pinball machines, and if you're also a sucker for leaderboards, I think there's a lot of fun to be had here. And in case you missed it, yes, you can play solo or 3-player co-op online with friends. Now, to reiterate, while the Laboratory Mode was a simple showcase for the sake of a showcase of, technical capabilities, at least Dynasty Mode is an actual game mode, like I said earlier. Now, with all that aside, let's get to the meat of the conversation. What's the point of all this, and where do we go from here? I think it's easy to toss something like this aside as either just a free add-on, so who cares, or as a sinful waste of development time and resources, but I believe that these experiments are more than just for fun projects over at Creative Assembly. I believe they're test beds. When Laboratory Mode released for Warhammer 2, one of the first things I thought was that it was a testing ground for larger unit sizes. I wouldn't be surprised if something like that already existed in a more crude or rudimentary form back at the CA headquarters, and with an Intel partnership, it was just given a fresh coat of paint and released to the masses. And what do we have in 3 Kingdoms? Extreme unit sizes. Now, are these directly correlated? Not necessarily, but at the risk of sounding like a crazy person, I wouldn't be surprised if there is some connection, at least to a degree. So, let's put on our tinfoil hats and consider what something like Dynasty Mode actually introduces to Total War, what they could be experimenting with, and what they could be pushing for. For one, I'm all for Creative Assembly working closely with hardware manufacturers to push the envelope and learn about or find efficiencies. If that means smoother frame rates, larger army sizes, or better visuals, I am all for it, no reason to complain. I wouldn't be surprised if this was an Intel-led initiative, with Total War being a great way for Intel to showcase processors. But beyond these hardware conversations, from a gameplay perspective, we're seeing a very different battle flow in Dynasty Mode. It's very possible that the romance/records style approach is here to stay with future Total War games, so we could be seeing the next iteration of how characters are laid out on the user interface, or what kinds of abilities are being made available. And if that's the case, I'm going to say it right now, I'm not the biggest fan of the abilities that actually emit flames and fire and weird supernatural special effects. That doesn't work for me. That doesn't do it for me. But back on topic, we're also seeing a very different type of battlefield. The radial deployment zone is something we're familiar with in siege battles, ambush battles, or encampment battles. But here, we have the AI spawning in a pattern on an open field in an infinite loop. Well, it's a finite loop of 30, but the system is in place to up that to whatever number, I imagine. Now, how is this pattern determined? Is there some logic behind it? I mean, there has to be. It's a computer processing information, obviously, so there is a pattern, there is some logic here, and how could that be used? Could we maybe be seeing the workings of a new battle type? If so, this is a great way to test what the optimal radius of the deployment zone and the edge of the map should be. It's also a good way to test the spawning system. Perhaps we're seeing a system that allows larger armies to engage in combat. If separating a battle into waves is a way of creating massive battles, is that something worth exploring? It's very possible that separating AI armies into parts might be a way of handling AI logic as well as hardware demands. After all, give the AI 100 units and it will likely just clump them up or line them up and send them your way. But give the AI 10 sets of 10 units and it might pursue some different avenues. This could very well be a test for that sort of system. Now, how does the AI behave if it spawns piecemeal armies, each wave of which has moving targets on the battlefield that need to be eliminated? That's exactly what your hero characters are. They're objectives for the AI to target. And let's not forget that 3 Kingdoms brought a fundamental change to an existing battle type already. The escape points in ambush battles are an excellent addition, and one that I've used to great effect in my campaigns. Are we maybe seeing the testing phase of a similar game-changing idea? All that might sound a little out there, but I don't think it's out of the question. And at the end of the day, Creative Assembly might just be testing out a new mode to introduce in future titles. There's definitely room for improvement, and I'd very much like to see a mode where you lead a full army against wave upon wave of enemy armies. That could lead to some really awesome moments, especially in historical titles. Let's not forget what it can do for fantasy titles, but imagine, for example, leading 300 Spartans against a 100-wave Persian army. Imagine leading 9,000 Englishmen against 30,000 Frenchmen, or 10,000 Parthian horsemen against 50,000 Romans, or you get my point. There are so many epic tales of victory and glorious defeat, and if the wave system opens the door for some such moments in our future Total War campaigns, I am all for it. Now, while that might be reserved for historical battles, I wouldn't be shocked to see some form of implementation for campaign battles as well. By blending the wave spawning concepts with battlefield objectives like we've seen before with siege battles or with ambush escape points, there might be some interesting possibilities where battles transition from phase to phase as the player accomplishes objectives. Now, this might open the door to actual multi-stage siege battles, or perhaps battles that span over a much larger expanse of territory where multiple armies get involved over longer distances on the campaign map. Maybe we're looking at something which involves vehicles in the future, and I'm going way too far. My point being is we're exploring ideas and gameplay systems that could represent much bigger concepts on the campaign map. And again, That's an interesting conversation. I'd really like to know if those conversations are happening. Think about it, the downtime between waves can very easily translate to downtime at an army camp, waiting for the next day of battle, or healing the wounded, etc., as the enemy is preparing for another assault. So these are all things that can translate into campaign gameplay or single-player gameplay aspects rather than just a standalone mode, and that I think is what I'm most excited for. And on top of all of this, it's very possible that we're just looking at another stress test for what numbers are possible. Now, I should maybe put my metaphorical pen and pad down before I get really crazy with these theories, but my point is this. I would not take Dynasty Mode at face value. It's a fun enough mode, it's an interesting experiment, and it's definitely not for every Total War player, especially those of us that don't care for romance mode. This very heavily leans in that direction. It's very much about these single hero characters. It feels like a very different kind of game. It's not the same sort of strategy game that Total War fans, long-term Total War fans especially, are perhaps into, or at least expecting from this title. But beyond that, it can do a lot for the series as a whole, and that is what I think I'm always looking for in these kinds of free updates, is where's the thinking coming from? Where might the thinking lead us? And I think this can actually do a lot. Whether you're just leading these heroes or leading armies against enemy waves, there's a lot that could be brought to Total War as a series from this experiment. But even as is, I can see my high score addiction kicking in every once in a while with my tremendous amounts of free time that I have compelling me to give things another go. I've enjoyed my time with Dynasty Mode. Would I play it on a daily basis? I don't know, but right now as I finish this recording, I am feeling the itch to go back in and try and play another round and do better than I did previously. But maybe that's just something I need to get checked out. I hope you enjoyed this look at the Total War 3 Kingdoms Dynasty Mode, and I hope my insane ramblings maybe get some wheels spinning and balls rolling. What do you think the purpose of this mode is? Just a freebie to throw out there? A way to keep us preoccupied? Something to talk about so that Reddit and Twitter and everybody can get angry at Creative Assembly for doing one thing and not the other? That doesn't sound likely. So do you think that maybe CA is testing out some new ideas here? And if so, what would you like to see something like this grow into? I think there's potential here for some pretty cool stuff, but as with all things, only time will tell. Or maybe I am a madman, that's also pretty likely. As always, for more Total War and strategy gaming content, make sure you subscribe to this channel. A massive thanks as always goes out to all of my channel members and patrons for supporting the channel on a monthly basis, and a big thanks goes out to each and every one of you for watching. Until next time, cheers.